then there's the idea of where the service and expertise factor into it. Is the most important piece of that interaction between client and broker service, or is it expertise?
Facilitation.
Yes. Facilitation, yeah. Exactly. So I love the example because there's so many different pieces that are asking you to think about not just the future aspect of it, but how are people valuing your business?
Absolutely. Or how they're seeing it. Are you just a facilitator, or are you an actual value adder to the actual facilitation?
Yeah, exactly.
But yes, you're leading TripAdvisor, Futurism, TripAdvisor, the way TripAdvisor sells tickets, sells rooms online, reviews, and so on. How did TripAdvisor, it's a futuristic idea, but how did it embrace futurism?
I mean, that's a kind of sensitive issue, and I don't want to really bring about any kind of derogatory and confirming statements. There isn't any to say, but the point would be is that I think that even TripAdvisor is struggling a little bit with that because it has a legacy approach to certain ways of doing online reputation management, which has also changed in its last 20 years since it's been around. What is the only way to get some kind of reviews was TripAdvisors. Now from Google to XYZ, everybody's got some sort of opinion. It's stated everywhere, booking.com, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you take that and you start changing it? Well, one thing that they did do that I think was long time coming that was necessary is they turned into a social platform. They started tapping into the crowd, the community that they have, to start aggregating from the community, like what you would be is places that Saeed would like is most likely I would like. So maybe oscillating through that, they could actually create a different channel. This is something that should happen a long time ago, but just happened over last year. But that's something that's embracing the future. All of these are very simple elements, but I think many people don't see them. Any company can look at an element of the future as a hazard, as a disruptive factor, or as an opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's the mindset that we need to address here. That mindset is what the executives need to shift into. These are opportunities. These are not disruptions to your business. Let's stop them, or let's plead to the government to stop and shut down Uber so that my driver business can.
Absolutely.
That's the driver saying, okay, maybe if I'm going to see this as an eventuality, maybe I should stop and maybe I should go and now add value to people who want to become Uber drivers and teach them how to become a better Uber driver because I've got 20 years of taxi experience, for example. That could be top dollar value rather than facilitation.
What I like what you just raised about the Uber experience is Uber created a value. So instead of me battling that created value and going and including the government supporting those that are failing to create value by blocking, for example, Uber, I should create a value that's much better than what Uber has created.
Or add to it, or be a part of it. Be a part of that chain.
Or be part of that chain.
A perfect example would be
defeating the purpose of change, of something futuristic, or defeating the purpose of change, which we talked about last time. It's everything against what makes a person individually even grow, or even organization to embrace something very futuristic.
Here's an example, I think, of a great way that we just described from Uber that I had the other night. As a matter of fact, whether it's feasible or not is a different story, but this is the kind of mindset that should be in a CEO's mind. Let's say I'm a heavy, labor-intensive service industry, classic kind of sense, repair, air conditionings, et cetera, et cetera. This requires what? A fleet, car, people, et cetera. So if I'm looking at it as a futuristic kind of service, I got to look at what's already out there. Heck, there's Uber out there. Maybe I can tap into Uber's infrastructure, get my service guys and not have to deal with buying service vans and having a fleet of people. Take it and use Ubers to take me to my service people because I can either track them, I can see where they are, I can get the timing. Everything's there. Uber's already providing this. If I can incorporate that to my existing structure and get rid of what would be considered legacy liabilities on my books, which is amortization of my car, et cetera, now it's actually a direct, line on debit from my accountants as an expense that I pay to Uber. That could be much more cheaper for me to do that than to go out and buy a bunch of cars and fleets and then lease them for 2 years and flip them around all the time.
True.
Taking care of the maintenance. There's 4 or 5 of the jobs in there. That's one aspect of what I'm talking about. This doesn't mean that it will work. It's not that it's feasible, but this is the way a CEO has to think. He has to be able to be willing to explore possibilities that are outside of the current working functions, taking into consideration that there will be a huge wave of assets coming in from technology. How to tap into that?
I think Uber, and I'll push back a bit on the Uber model because I actually think Uber is not very futuristic. I think or future facing. I think Uber actually benefits from
It's a short term.
it's a short-term play, and I think it's evidence in the way they run their business. I think
Yeah.
That could be hardly dispute. I mean, that could be argued greatly because now they're really heavily investing into automated automobiles.
Yeah, and so that's going to be my point, that they're making the bet that their current model will become sustainable based on taking human beings out of the equation, which is one of their highest points of conflict. The formation of the business itself was not, in my mind, when you think about the core of what Uber does, or any taxi, is to get you from point A to point B. So there was no real innovation in that space. What they innovated on was your expectation, which is what we discussed yesterday. That instead of you going out in a heavily urban trafficked area, we're in Istanbul, or whether we're in New York or what have you, there's this idea that, okay, I could go outside and I could hail a cab, but I'm uncertain as to how quickly that cab is going to be there, right? And Fifth Avenue, it might be different from a particular street, but anyone gets the idea of what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. What Uber has done is solved for that X factor of expectancy.
But that's a short term.
That's a short-term thing, but I think that's identifying the future piece of identifying that customers had friction around that point, right? The expectation of when my ride is coming.
But again, this goes back like Henry Ford. I was saying, if you ask customers, they're going to say a faster horse. So if these people are going to ask, they're going to ask for a faster person to appear there to take them. No one would ever consider a future person is what considers, what if we just took the person out completely?
Yeah.
That's the dramatics of being able to think like that.
But that's the bad. And
that's the bad. That's the good, actually.
No, but hold on.
No, not bad. But what I would
the
offer...
debate here for Uber, for example, where you raised a point and I'll challenge that, and you said that it takes a person from point A to point B, and that's the short term.
Yeah.
But the futurism of Uber is not transportation; it's logistics.
Logistics, exactly.
Yeah,
that's why they,
absolutely,
for instance, went into Uber Eats, which they said, "Hey, look, I've got a bunch of drivers.
It's going to go to shipping. It's going to go to many.
Right.
Uber is going to change the way we live. What if it's Uber or something else? But the way we transport things, whether if it's individual packaging or anything, is going to change.
Like if I was Uber's CEO, I would be taking the first competitor for me as a company. I'd take UPS and FedEx.
Absolutely.
That's
where I see the distance is going to.
And where my future hat would be to challenge on the immediacy in how we live that makes that sort of delivery necessary.
Well, I mean, look, this is the thing. I mean, looking at a consumer perspective, one thing that's never going to change is a commodity. As all of the technology takes us to, demand is now negligible. What we used to pay, for stamps to send out a mass mail, we can now do for no money whatsoever. So marketing has now become a negligible zero as far as reaching people from influencers and Instagram. All of this technology is bringing down the cost. It's just bringing down the cost of everything. Everything is dropping in cost like crazy. Manufacturing, supply, all of this. So as this drops, the one thing that stays the same is time.
Absolutely.
So it's going to get to a point where the Ferrari, the material that's used and the craftsmanship isn't going to be as important as the delivery time of that Ferrari for me. So that's the element that's going to future is going to bring to us.
In fact,
so that's going to be like, I can sit here and order a Ferrari right now. You can too. That's not what we're going to dispute. What we're going to dispute is whether you can get that Ferrari outside right now, or if I'm going to have to wait 2 weeks to get it.